So, it's 2014, and I'm sitting in my living room watching Man of Steel on cable, and I am terrified. This movie was not Superman as I had known him for a variety of different reasons. I'd known the Reeves Superman, the animated series Superman, versions of the character that championed hope, kindness, and determination. But after I saw Man of Steel, I thought Superman was lame and misunderstood his importance for a long time. So today I want to talk about Superman and people's understanding of him in popular culture, and ask, when exactly did Superman become lame? To start, we need to go back to 1954. In 1954, the Comics Code Authority was established after Dr. Frederick Wertham, I do not know, published Seduction of the Innocent, where he accused all comics of corrupting children and turning them to crime. He proved this by asking delinquent children if they read comics, and they of course said yes. That is like asking a kid in 2025, do you know what an iPad is? The rules of the Comics Code Authority were no sex, no drugs, no cursing, no rock and roll, and no nudity. The words terror and weird were banned from titles, and cops had to always be right and villains had to always lose. These rules supposedly ensured the avoidance of tainting America's youth with sex, drugs, villainy, and communism, baby. It's the 50s. Of course they were worried about communism. After a couple decades, comic companies just started to ignore the authority, preferring to sell books to stores that didn't care about their seal. In the late 70s, they started to introduce more mature themes into popular books like Daredevil, Punisher, Batman. And by the 90s, independent comic book publishers were competing against Marvel and DC, and independent comic books have always been known for their more mature, heavy subject matter. So by 2001 and 2011, the two companies decided to abandon the code completely, instead instituting their own rating system. Along the way, in 1986, DC released Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns. Wow, 1986. What a crazy year for those two books to both be released. That was probably Zack Snyder's favorite year ever. Watchmen's main theme is who watches the Watchmen? A concept basically just saying that heroes aren't guaranteed good people, and some will use their power irresponsibly, which, of course, is a reflection of real-life political leaders and police. While I do think that that's an important and valid take, it's one that has just become a reason to pull characters out of their world and into ours in movies and TV and even comics so many times. The Dark Knight Returns had Batman using guns and killing people, and Superman is an agent for the government. These books changed everything by making heroes serious and dark in ways that hadn't been done before, and showed that they could sell, giving publishers the confidence to explore this concept further. From 1986 on, there's a noticeable edginess in comic books. People always talk about the 90s as the edgiest era of comic books, and that stems directly from 1986 and the popularity of Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns. But how does this all tie into Superman? The Death of Superman came out in October 1992, and they killed Superman to show that he isn't invincible and, of course, to increase readership. And it worked, because Death of Superman was one of the best-selling comic runs of the 90s. But most importantly, it just proved that Superman's stories can be serious and still honor his character at the same time. A couple years later, readership was down again, and editorial decided to shake up the status quo a bit with Superman again, and they did it in the form of Superman Red, Superman Blue. And the plan to increase readership did not work this time. Longtime fans hated it, as Superman was split into two heroes with a completely different power set than usual. And new readers had a hard time jumping in because this wasn't a Superman that they were familiar with or anybody else. Heading into the 2000s, Superman comics were pretty good, but the flop of Superman Returns in 2006 brought public opinion of Superman way down, especially considering that that movie was a spiritual successor to the original Christopher Reeve movies that are very beloved among Superman fans and non-fans alike. The 2000s also saw the theatrical releases of The Dark Knight and Watchmen. And Watchmen the movie did the same exact thing in 2009 that Watchmen the book did in 1986. It made people want to see heroes in our world, a realistic world. In 2011, DC Comics decided that their universe was getting a little stagnant, maybe a little boring, and they decided to reset the universe in the form of the New 52. And it was not very greatly publicly received. It took the edginess of 90s stories and put them in a more modern reconfiguration, and people were finding that that still just did not work for Superman. In 2013, Man of Steel finally comes out. I just want to take a little pause to say a couple things about Man of Steel. I just want to make it very clear that I do not think that Man of Steel is a bad movie at all. I just think that it suffers from a severe misunderstanding of its main character and the characters around him. This is an example that has been picked to death over the last decade, but the idea that Clark would ever let his father die for concern of his own identity and his own selfish reasons is just ridiculous to anybody who has a basic understanding of Superman and his character. Superman cherishes life, and he especially, of course, cherishes the life of his loved ones. I will never understand why he just didn't jump in there and save him. I understand that they wanted to preserve his identity and make this monumental moment for Clark where he realizes that he can't save everyone, the typical he can't save everyone with Pa Kent's death. But in this instance, it just doesn't work because it is an ultimatum for Clark. It's either reveal your identity and save your dad, or let your dad die and be safe. And that ultimately is the same situation that Clark falls into with Zod at the end of the movie. It's either join us or I destroy your world. And Superman has, I would say he has a lot of other choices, but to Zack Snyder, he has no other choice than to kill Zod. 2013 also saw the release of Injustice, which portrays Superman as a planet-destroying fascist. These two takes aren't necessarily bad, but being released in the same year and having a huge audience for both fundamentally changed how people see Superman. Man of Steel also starts Zack Snyder's habit of just not understanding the characters that he is adapting. Batman vs. Superman had just a ridiculous plot and no actual accuracy to source material. There was egregious violence on both Batman and Superman's parts, the god-awful Martha scene, and Superman just dies way too soon into this universe. It's his second appearance for the audience, and it's only a while after he's made himself known to the public in Man of Steel. And they killed him off in his second appearance. To this day, I just cannot believe that. All in favor of catching up with the MCU and rushing the DCEU. This was something that ultimately was a huge Achilles heel for the DCEU. Justice League came out in 2017, and they resurrected Superman, but he was only really at the end of the movie and didn't have much to do. He just kind of came in, fixed everybody's problems, and went back to Smallville. The day was saved. I do want to talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League really quick, because I know I have been taking a big steaming dookie on Snyder's name this entire time, but I promise to you, I love Zack Snyder's Justice League. I don't think that Zack Snyder is a bad director. He is far from it. I mean, if you've seen his work, it's beautiful. And in Justice League, he showed to me that he can understand the characters that he's making these movies about, and he can make it beautiful all at the same time. I feel as though Zack Snyder's Justice League is the best representation of what Zack Snyder can do when he really, really applies himself. Eventually, Warner Brothers clearly had no idea what to even do with Superman, leading to the Shazam post-credit scene, and right before the universe ended, the Black Adam post-credit scene, promising an eventual fight between Superman and Black Adam. And when the DCEU came to an end in 2023, James Gunn announced his new DCU with a new Superman movie coming out July 2025. After negative fan reception on the New 52, in 2016, DC canceled it and launched Rebirth, completely rebooting the universe again and bringing Superman back to the Superman that we know in the comics. They had new stories where Superman was a father and a husband, and they had stories that built off of what we had been used to. In 2021, the CW debuted Superman and Lois, a show that builds off of the whole concept that I was just talking about of Superman having a family and being a dad. That show was something that I did not pay attention to at all until it ended, and once I finally did, I said, oh my god, have I been missing out. Yes, the show has its flaws, it is still a CW show, but if you can get past that, Tyler Hoechlin's performance and portrayal as Clark Kent and Superman is top tier, genuinely one of the best we have ever had. In 2023, the animated show My Adventures with Superman debuted, starring Jack Quaid as Superman, something that was a pleasantly shocking surprise. Most people, of course, know Jack Quaid as Huey from The Boys, and to hear him as Superman is definitely cognitively dissonant at first, but once you get past it, that show is amazing. My Adventures with Superman puts Superman back in a world that is bright and colorful and hopeful while maintaining stakes. I like that My Adventures with Superman is telling the typical Superman origin story, but slightly different, slightly tweaked. It reminds me of the new Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man show. Obviously, Superman came out first, but they both hold similarities in that I feel like I'm watching something I've seen before, but it's different enough to keep me on my toes and keep watching. And to top off all the Superman media that we've covered so far, James Gunn's Superman is coming to theaters in July of this year. I just want to take a second and geek out about this movie. I don't think I have ever been so excited for a movie. Way back in 2014, when the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie came out, I remember watching that movie with my parents in our living room, like I did with Man of Steel, that's funny, and knowing that I was seeing something different. I was 8 years old and I didn't even really know what different was, but this was different, and I have the same exact feeling with Superman. With that trailer, I was immediately obsessed. I've been following the news about the movie since it was announced, but to finally see it and to have something tangible, proof that this movie is happening, was amazing. And I mean, not to mention that just the trailer itself was superb. It showed us what the world is going to feel like, what Superman is going to feel like, but it didn't tell us anything. If I wasn't the biggest Superman super nerd in the world, and I knew nothing about Superman before seeing that trailer, I know that I would be intrigued and interested to see what this story could possibly be about. I think now in 2025, the idea that stemmed from Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns and independent comics, that superheroes can be brought into our world and made more realistic, more gritty. I think people are just tired of that concept in 2025. Talks over comic accuracy and the MCU and DCEU alike not portraying characters to their fullest comic extent has been very loud over the past 5 or 6 years. And I think because after Endgame came out, people got a little tired of the formula and they want to see something new, and they realize that the thing that we have been missing for so much time has been the idea of us going into their world. The MCU is great. Iron Man, the first Iron Man movie, is amazing with how much it feels like it could be real. The whole MCU, up to a certain point, of course, is amazing with how real it feels like it could be. But as big comic fans, and as the world's state is getting more negative and more negative every day, people don't really want to think about the real world and our world and logistics and how everything's going to work. We want to see Superman fight a kaiju and hang out with his flying dog. Thank you, James Gunn, for giving us that. And it's not just the new Superman movie that's telling me that either. The Fantastic Four trailer came out, and oh my god, that might be the most creative, comic accurate, and beautiful Marvel project to ever come out. All in all, I think Superman is a character that will always be important. Since his conception in the late 30s to right now, he has always stood for the same values, and he has always, well, I just spent an entire video proving that he hasn't always had the same traits, but to me, he has always had the same traits. What makes Superman, real Superman, is, of course, the word hope. I also see him as an example of an extreme kindness and an extreme determination and an extreme love for the people of Earth. Superman would do anything to protect humanity, and not just humanity, life. Superman would do anything to bring positivity into people's lives day to day, and that is just something that we all need to strive for. In the past decade or so, Superman just hasn't been represented as a character that works that way. And I really do believe that with the start of James Gunn's DCU and this new Superman movie, we'll see Superman return to form, and people will finally get it. Thank you so much for watching. This is my first video. I am completely obsessed with this character. I don't know if you could tell, but I appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. I'll see you later.